The Lord crowns each year with bounty. Hi everyone, my name is Imo Wilson, your coffee evangelist, and today I have brought you something so fundamental, and every year millions of people say, I am making this year count. And this is where professional baristas are separated from junior ones. Because if you will understand how coffee was discovered, you will really love coffee. You will really change how you look at coffee. And so, the question that most people ask, what was coffee before it was a global drink? Where was coffee discovered? Who discovered it? I created this channel just for you so that you do not have to figure out things in the hard way. Because I remember what it looks like to be a beginner, looking at great baristas behind the bar, doing so great stuff, and you wonder like, how do they even know all this? And so today we are answering those questions. Where was coffee discovered? Most people talk coffee as if it started in the bar with cafes, but no. Coffee started here, Ethiopia, the root of coffee, the birthplace of coffee. And why is Ethiopia so significant in our study for coffee? We all know that Ethiopia is not only a place of origin, but it is also the birthplace of coffee. Isn't it amazing to learn how coffee was discovered? So, how was coffee discovered? In Ethiopia, we are going to see what we call the wild origin. And what is this wild origin? When we talk about the wild origin of coffee, we mean before coffee became a global drink. Coffee grew in the wild forest with other forest trees. It was a shrub. And we know Arabica coffee thrives very well at this altitude. That affects the flavor complexity of the coffee. So, what was coffee? Coffee was a bean from a cherry, like it was a cherry in other terms. Before it became your favorite cappuccinos, your lattes, it was just a cherry. So, who discovered coffee and how was coffee discovered? Long back in Ethiopia, around the 9th century, there lived a legend called Khalid. Khalid was a goat herder, like he was a shepherd. And you know, shepherds, they go out in the forest to tend their flock. So one day, Khalid noticed his goats feeling unusually energetic, alert, and sharp. So Khalid was a curious man. That's where our curiosity comes in. So out of curiosity, and because Khalid was curious, goats uh, feeling unusually energetic. So he observed it, and then he was a curious man, remember we said. So he tried out the beans himself. So when he tried out the cherry himself, we all know that coffee has a natural stimulant we call caffeine. And if you're new to coffee, maybe if your first time when you try coffee for the very first time, you realize if you sip, you feel like that uplifting force. So I think that's what Khalid noticed. He saw his goods feeling unusually energetic, and when he tried it, he felt the same alertness because of what coffee offers naturally. So Khalid was observant. So from observation, Khalid questioned. So after questioning, the experiment was complete. And this is the scientific method that most baristas ignore, or people who are so passionate about coffee ignore. That there are three things that we have to practice on a daily basis. You have to be observant, and then out of observation, you have to question. And when you question, you will have to experiment trying it out. This is exactly what Khalid did. He saw the goats and then he questioned, why is it like this? and then he experimented it. This is the same thing that applies to modern day-to-day baristas. Great baristas do not just push out buttons, pull out shots, but what great baristas do is they follow this cycle. They follow this cycle. Observation, question, and experiment. Give an example. You notice your shot of espresso is not appeasing. You will have to experiment. You'll have to know why. And so by that, you'll not just be testing things blindly. And so that is why the Khalid story is so important. And whether it is a myth or it is a true story, what matters is the lessons that we pick from it. And what are the lessons we pick from it? Curiosity, being curious, discipline, and respect. You can also say sharing knowledge freely, because it is not yet done. After Khalid discovered the coffee, what did he do? Khalid was not greedy with what he discovered in the forest. He carried that coffee and took to the monks in the community. And coffee, before it became the popular global drink or global product, because you realize that coffee is the second traded global product. Coffee was rejected with the monks. They thought it was the devil's invention because they considered it not clean. But when they threw it in the fire, as the legend says, the aroma rose from it. And so it is the way coffee came to existence, how coffee was discovered. We have said in Ethiopia through a legend named Kaldi, that is around the 9th century. And Khalid first noticed his goats feeling unusually energetic. And so, what is so key in this journey is that in Ethiopia, coffee was a ceremony and a process. Coffee had a process. Coffee right now still has a process. Long before coffee reaches your cup or your machine, it has endured a lot of patience. It carries story. It has crossed thousands and thousands of kilometers. So before you treat coffee casually, you have to respect and learn the origin. Because if you learn the origin, you build what we call authority. You build confidence. And so, in this origin, remember we are still talking about Ethiopia. And in Ethiopia, we've all heard of the coffee ceremony and the process. So something little about this coffee ceremony is that the coffee beans are roasted fresh. They are ground with hand or by hands. They don't use the grinders like we use today in the machines, in the cafes. They are ground manually with hands and served in jabenas. We all know those coffee pots in Ethiopia, they are called jabenas. And depending how and maybe where you are, but they also tend to serve it in 3 rounds. And so, why is this like this? What we pick from this is that coffee was not rushed. Like today, we call it rush hour, my to go coffee. That wasn't the thing. Coffee was a process, it was a ceremony. Coffee brought together the community, and elders came and sat in those small gatherings only because coffee was what united them. And so, how is this coffee history applicable to modern day today baristas? You know, in this world that is rushing with trends, I want you to know one thing. Here, we are not chasing trends. Here, we are learning coffee from the roots because we have to build that understanding of coffee. so that when you are called out to represent coffee, you represent it with confidence, with passion. And so, how will you be confident about something that you do not know where it comes from? And so, coffee is this history is applicable even today, and modern day today baristas need to know this. And the lessons that we pick from this is one, we mentioned about curiosity. And remember, we said curiosity is being curious about something is like you see something and you do not ignore it. Remember, when we talked about curiosity, we said it is observation, question, and then experiment. The same thing that Khalid did before is the same thing that we do right. So the same thing that Khalid did in the forest is still applicable today even. What is that? Observation, and then you question, and then you experiment. Let me bring this to our attention. And we all know there's this routine in the bar, they say you have to do your calibration. And so, what is calibration? I know we have not yet got there, but what is it? How did it come to existence? That calibration, we all know, is checking the consistency of our coffee. And so, how will you check the consistency of coffee when you are not observant, when you do not question, and then when you do not experiment it? So, all these things work together. Nothing is independent of the other. And so baristas today need to know this, or anyone else out there who is looking to master or to gear up his knowledge in coffee. You need to be observant. That's all that we can say, that observation discovered coffee, and observation is key, because you cannot just test blindly. We do not test blindly. And so curiosity, I said, is not testing blindly to our baristas. And so this history also brings to our attention that discipline is key. And so, because how is it key? Because we know discipline is respecting this. We have all said that coffee was not rushed in Ethiopia. So, because coffee was not rushed in Ethiopia, we create a discipline. We can say in the bar we have ratios. We have to be key in respecting those ratios. And so, because Kalidi repeated this process, observation, question, and experiment, another lesson is discipline. And we all know discipline, I said, is respecting those ratios that we have. So, discipline is what leads to consistency. And I tell you, if you are consistent in what you do, you will build authority. With this knowledge that you have learned, you will respect the origin. And what is the origin of coffee? How did it come to existence? We have said it was discovered in Ethiopia by a legend called Kaldi. And Kaldi was observant. What did Khalid observe? He observed his goats feeling unusually. Okay, so you see how coffee is so interesting. Coffee brings us and leads us to real nature, to interact with nature. So, my dear friends, this episode still continues. And in the next one, we are traveling to Yemen. We all know that now Ethiopia brought curiosity. Ethiopia caused people to begin questioning, what is this plant? But then when we travel to Yemen, we are seeing how coffee was really transformed into a culture. We are going to look how the Yemeni monks started brewing coffee. And so the same thing that Khalid did in the forest is still applicable today even. What is that? Observation, and then you question, and then you experiment. Let me bring this to our attention. In the bar, you extract your shot. And we all know there's this routine in the bar. They say you have to do your calibration. And so, what is calibration? I know we have not yet got there, but what is it? How did it come to existence? That calibration, we all know, is checking the consistency of our coffee. And so, how will you check the consistency of coffee when you are not observant, when you do not question, and then when you do not experiment it? So, all these things work together. Nothing is independent of the other. And so baristas today need to know this, or anyone else out there who is looking to master or to gear up his knowledge in coffee. You need to be observant. That's all that we can say, that observation discovered coffee, and observation is key, because you cannot just test blindly. We do not test blindly. And so curiosity, I said, is not testing blindly to our baristas. And so this history also brings to our attention that discipline is key. And so, because how is it key? Because we know discipline is respecting this. We have all said that coffee was not rushed in Ethiopia. So, because coffee was not rushed in Ethiopia, we create a discipline. We can say in the bar we have ratios. We have to be key in respecting those ratios. This did not start with cafes. This did not start with espresso machine. Neither did it start in modern roasteries. This started way back in the wild forests of Ethiopia, where coffee grew as a wild tree. So many baristas hold this as a result of centuries of farmers, centuries of traders, century of roasters, but a few stop long enough to respect the journey. So therefore, if you want to grow, learn coffee and master it from the root, you have to remember the three lessons that we pick from Ethiopia. One, curiosity. Great baristas never stop asking why. Two is discipline. Coffee rewards precision and not shortcuts. Three is respect for origin. Because we all know before this became a global product, it was culture. Because in Ethiopia, coffee was never rushed. It was a ceremony and a process. Therefore, this small seed built a global industry. It can build your career too. So follow for more, subscribe as you travel to Yemen, where coffee moved from being a discovery to being a globally traded product. We are going to find out how in the next episode. Thank you and see you in the next cup.